before the idea of a prison system or a penitentiary system, before it became set, if you will, generally consisted of fines, whippings, public floggings, incarceration in local jails, branding, death, which is the ultimate, and exile. Those were the general punishment techniques used before they got the penitentiaries and the prisons working. Keep in mind, particularly if we're reading heirs, keep in mind, Southern prison advocates couch their language in something called republicanism. Right? Southern prison advocates, which were few and far between, but who had actual power in the South. Nobody was down for the prisons, but Southern prison advocates couched their language in republicanism. The people had to agree. The people had to agree with the idea of a new prison system. They weren't feeling it. But they had to agree with it if it was going to be successful. They could not mount this prison project without the consent of the people. So Southern prison advocates, they would argue in various forms. Incarcerating people, incarcerating bad people, it would cleanse our society of the undesirables, of the deviants. The institution promised to remake, reform people, introduce a new level of morality to the community. It promised to make communities safe and healthy. Again, the people argued against the idea of the penitentiary. The South allowed two major votes on this idea, this thing called the penitentiary. And in both cases, the bill was defeated. All right, make sure we're reading heirs now. This bill was defeated in 1812. And this bill also was again defeated in 1834. However, this is some persistent little buggers now. Lawmakers thought they knew what was best for the people now. You have to understand, the wealthy and the educated had a great stake in developing or strengthening social control. The penitentiary for them would be a way, a method for the class to control and better yet profit in a new way, fresh way, off of the people. So they're going to make this work. We're going to make it work. We're going to stick with it. We're going to figure it out. But it's going to work. Anyway, what did the white Christian church think about the penitentiary? Real quickly. What was their response? Ms. Yasser.
They didn't agree. It didn't go with the Bible. The Bible said...
What did the Bible say? Yeah, what did the Bible say? How did they justify their position?
Oh, the Bible dealt specifically with punishment, and the Bible's punishment was swift, severe, and bloody. The Bible never mentioned a penitentiary.
Right. So people's not feeling it, the populace, white and black, right? Because, now, republicanism, this is what the white, wealthy, small, in terms of numbers, lawmakers, they need republicanism to make their agenda go through. Okay, the people is not down with it, right? So they now decide to go over to the church, which is a dominant, powerful force in the country at that time. Well, just like Ms. Yasser said, they didn't dig it, they're not digging it, they're not feeling it neither. Bible deals with wrongdoers. God deals with wrongdoers. The energy will deal with wrongdoers. We don't need a penitentiary system to lock people up to do that. Therefore, we don't need prison. God will take care of it. And while the members of the church and the priests were present in the prisons, they were present in the prisons then like they are today. Then just like they are today. And while the members of the church or priests were present in the prisons, helping how they could, as an institution, they did not support the mass incarceration. So they were regularly in the prisons praying, etc., 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 conducting service on Sundays for the inmates. But as an institution, they openly and publicly did not support the idea in the first period of incarceration. The people saw prison in conflict. The church saw prison in conflict, principally, at least according to Ayers and in Butterfield, in conflict with the code of honor. Penitentiary, according to Ayers, quote unquote, was an agent of the state. It was an agent of the state. Capitalism, or financial return, was the central interest for the North and the South. They were going to figure out how to get kick-started this prison system, right? Because we got to make money. We got to make money. Capitalism became the focus. Again, according to Ayers, there was very little difference in the barbarity of the prison systems in the North as compared to the South. The North preached, Edward Ayers, quote unquote, as the South would often say at that time, y'all preach a dignified game. But the prisons were just as horrible as ours, or as the South. The North were not tolerant of its criminals, and they did what they could to isolate them. They were not liberal in any means, outside of just saying, they're just acting like they were liberal. Interestingly enough, although these forces, particularly the church, particularly the people, were resistant to the idea of the penitentiary, particularly in the first period, eventually, the white wealthy lawmakers would have their way. And ironically enough, it would be the forces of republicanism, capitalism, according to Ayers, and I agree, in Protestant, in evangelical Protestantism, as he would say. These three elements, republicanism, capitalism, and evangelical Protestantism, or the church, ironically enough, at the end of the day, all would work to produce a culture that would be eventually accepting and ultimately justify the rationale for the penitentiary to take root in the South and throughout the country. Like I said, they eventually had their way, and it became the system that they were looking for. But Edward Ayers is arguing that it is these three principal forces that produce the culture that rationalize and justify the prison systems that we see today. All right, with a few minutes I got left. Most white people were put on trial. Slaves were considered appropriate citizens slaves weren't considered appropriate citizens for the courts, technically. Keep in mind, they were quote unquote, as it's being written in the readings, they were gentle and ignorant people, right? They weren't intellectual or good enough to be in the same courtroom as these intelligent people over here. They need to be over there doing the work on the plantation. They were gentle and ignorant people. Black prisoners generally were free men when they were.